All right, so hello everyone. The title of my talk is Iterate to Innovate, and I'm going to be talking about our journey with DeepNote AI. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Ondrej. I'm a software engineer at DeepNote, and I started working on AI roughly 1 year ago. So basically since then, my colleagues make fun of me that I basically became a prompt engineer, so I just go by that. All right, what am I going to be talking about today? I'm going to be talking about 4 things. I'm going to start off by talking about how we delivered our first version of DeepNote AI. Then I'm going to be talking about how we listened to customer feedback and made continuous improvements to DeepNote AI. I'm going to also share some prompt engineering tips and tricks with you. And finally, I'm going to wrap things up with some food for thought, and that is, what is the perfect interface for working with LLMs? So what's DeepNote? Could I get a show of hands who here knows what DeepNote is? Ah, okay, nice, awesome. My follow-up question usually would be, because I wouldn't get that many hands raised, would be who knows here what a data notebook is? I assume that since you know DeepNote, a couple people know here. For the ones that don't know what DeepNote or data notebook is, I'll just quickly explain. DeepNote is a data notebook, and a data notebook is basically this central piece in the middle. Officially, data notebook is an interactive computing paradigm. And that sounds very fancy, but what you can imagine it like is basically Lego. Data notebook is a collection of various blocks. In the DeepNote's case, those blocks are text or some code or some charts. And like Lego bricks, you can combine them together and build some kind of a report or analysis or dashboard. Here's a very, very simple demo of what DeepNote does. Basically, I have some code block. I can execute it and greet you all here. I have some variable called number of beers equal to 1. I execute it, and I inspect it again. The output is 1. If I add 1 to that variable, it should be updated to 2. So when I inspect it again, the output will be updated. And I can keep doing that. I think you get the idea of how interactive this is. This was a very simple simple example, but I think you can quickly imagine how this turns into a very powerful tool. With a bunch of clicks, you can, this is just a GIF, so I'll wait for it to start over. With a bunch of clicks, you can connect your, for example, Snowflake database, query the data there, and visualize the data that you got. With a bunch of clicks, you go from connecting to visualizing your data. Just to summarize, DeepNote is a tool for data teams. It's a collaborative data notebook, sometimes also called Jupyter Notebook. There are various types of blocks that you can use there, mostly text or code. And those code blocks, they go usually with Python or SQL code. Now, what is DeepNote AI? More interesting. Well, DeepNote AI today is a collection of generative AI features, and they're all focusing on the core work at DeepNote and making it easier. So generating code, generating text. Now, that wasn't always the case. We had to start from somewhere. And like most of the industry, we had very little experience with building AI tools. So we started off with a bunch of questions. How should the AI look like? In what ways will be users using it? And most importantly, what are the problems of our users that we can solve effectively with AI? So the first version of DeepNote AI. But before we go on and see what the first version looked like, let's actually just quickly update our logo to make sure that everyone knows that we're working on AI. Right. Just kidding, of course. But we actually did add those purple sparkles into the product next to every DeepNote block. And if the user clicked on it, they would get a series of commands specifically designed for a use case within DeepNote. So generate code, edit code, explain some code. If the user clicked on one, they would get a text input to enter their prompt. If they submitted that prompt, they would get some code and some textual explanation of any changes made displayed next to it. So, taking a step back, this splitting of code and text explanation, this is what I want to share with you in a little bit more detail today. So what we actually wanted to do, taking a step back, is maximize LLM performance. We all know that LLMs are non-deterministic, and it's sometimes pretty hard to work with them. And we wanted to make sure that we output code and text separately, or somehow in a way that we can separate the two consistently. So generally there are three ways how you can maximize LLM performance. There's more context, or also called retrieval augmented generation. And that really wouldn't work for us right here, because the context window that we had available, we wanted to fill it in with some other data. For example, context relevant to the specific user using deep node context, your existing work in the notebook that you might have been working on. So that was a no-go. Then there was fine-tuning, and of course we ruled it out immediately as well, because we just know that this wouldn't be a good investment. Fine-tuning for us at the time when we started working on this, so roughly a year ago, where new models were coming up fairly frequently, if very regularly, it didn't seem like a good investment. You would have to collect your data, you would have to somehow maintain your data set, fine-tune the model, maintain the fine-tuned model, just a lot of work. Didn't seem like a good idea. So we set on prompt engineering. And now when I mean prompt engineering, we somehow had to instruct the model to output, to produce its output in a certain way. And to do that, we took inspiration from a well-known tool, ChatGPT. So how does actually ChatGPT structure its outputs? I've got a screenshot of ChatGPT right here, and you can see that there's a code segment, and it really stands out from the rest of it. So if we look under the hood, what's actually going on is that ChatGPT is outputting Markdown, and the code is well enclosed in those like triple backtick delimiters. It even has the language identifier Python there. So we got inspired by this, and we decided that we will request GPT to produce an output in a format that it is familiar with, Markdown. We basically knew that what we're asking it to do is a pretty hard problem, and we wanted to simplify it as much as possible, take part of the burden onto our own shoulders. Now that we've successfully asked GPT to produce a Markdown, we would somehow need to parse it. In our case, we were streaming the output in the UI, so we were streaming generated Markdown. And this here is a quick diagram that I produced. It might look very confusing, but it's supposed to show a very simple flow. Basically, we were looking at incoming chunks of the generated output and tagging them with a tag, either code or text, so that we could somehow separate the two in the UI. So a very simple example, we looked at the first chunk, we saw triple delimiters, so we knew that represents that a code will follow. We tagged that chunk as code. All subsequent chunks were also tagged by code, and we were waiting for that closing, the third chunk, which has those closing delimiters, and after that we knew that all subsequent chunks we could treat as text. So all of this process, and it was quite hefty, we spent some time on this, was spent to our major focus was on splitting the code and explanation in the UI. Now, we were very proud of the fact that we did it, and we were really excited to show it to our users and hear their feedback. So what did our users have to say on this? Did they like it? Yeah, not really. I mean, the feedback that we got was specifically on this very negative. I never read the explanation. I don't find the text explanation when editing particularly useful, or just straight up the explanation is covering my code. Just get it the hell out of there. So we decided to remove those textual explanations, and there is a learning here. We prematurely optimized for something that we thought that the users will find important. And they didn't. If we didn't focus on this, we would be able to ship that first version of DeepNode AI a bit sooner and get actual user feedback a bit sooner. Now, over the course of time, we collected more feedback from users, such as the text input field is too small, I can't easily spot what exact changes were made to the code, or it doesn't know about my previous work in the notebook. And we did ship improvements over time. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but I'm just going to straight up to the current version, which looks like this. And as you can see, it looks slightly different. We've overhauled the UI completely. We've started off with a much larger text input that's more prominent. Any edits to the code that the user might be doing would be displayed with a diff view, so it's easy to spot any changes. Also, there's an ability to run your code and test it before accepting it. And we would also provide more context about your work and your existing work in the notebook so that you can, for example, refer to, I don't know, some existing variable that you might have in the notebook already. We've also done some changes behind the scenes. We've expanded the context, so by that I mean the context that we're providing to GPT, mostly deep note context or the user's context in deep note. We've switched to using GPT-4, a good trick, just if you're struggling with your responses, just use a better model. We switched to using OpenAI functions that made the whole parsing of the outputs much simpler. And we refined our prompts with tests. What does that mean? I think basically we were refining prompts on a weekly, almost daily basis, and we needed to make sure that the improvements that we're making are not introducing any regressions in other aspects. So testing is a way to refine our prompts with confidence. Some prompt engineering tricks that we've gathered over the time. Simplify the problem. This is coming back to our decision to request a markdown format instead of just plain text. Maybe your problem that you're solving is also quite complex. Subdividing it to smaller tasks sounds like a good idea. Provide examples, both correct and incorrect. This was also very helpful. Provide input and output schemas. Tell GPT what you're going to give it, and also tell it what you're expecting back. Be specific. In our case, we were mostly asking for producing Python, but not all Python is executable or relevant in the context of Jupyter Notebooks. It's a specific environment. So we decided to just refer to the code that we're requesting as Jupyter Notebooks. And this helped because Jupyter Notebooks are open source. It's an open source format and probably very present in the training data of OpenAI's models. A couple of more tricks. Be assertive. The good old you must output your format in a certain way works. Try to treat the model as a person. If you were chatting to a person, you would probably encourage them to think. You would maybe tell them, take a moment, think about the answer. This works with the models as well. One of my favorite new ones is let GPT repeat the instructions back to you. We were solving a problem where we really insisted on a set of rules and instructions that weren't clearly present in the GPT's training data. So when we asked it to follow those rules, it would just straight up ignore them. We didn't like it. So we asked GPT to repeat the instructions, and that helped it a lot to stay on course. It actually didn't violate those instructions as often. And finally, place important instructions towards the beginning or very end of your prompts. I think this is another parallel with conversations that we humans have. When you're chatting to another person, most likely what they will remember is either the beginning of the conversation or the very end. Now, we were quite happy with the solution that we delivered. Our users were too, but we set out to develop something even more exciting. And that exciting thing is Auto AI. So what Auto AI is basically an agent. Auto stands for autonomous. And it's an agent in Deep Note that allows you to basically give you a goal. Sorry, you give it a goal, and it ventures off generating code and text. But not only that, it also executes the code. So this gives Auto AI a big advantage, or something that it sets it apart from the other AI features, and that's that it is truly autonomous. If it encounters some error, it's able to fix itself. If it encounters something that it maybe didn't expect, like some weirdly formatted data, let's say, it can perhaps try to adapt its course and approach the problem differently. So just to recap, Auto AI generates and executes code autonomously. We built it with control, no need to worry, it doesn't just venture off and never stop. There's a big stop AI button in the top right, and for example, the access to block output is something that the user has to explicitly approve of. Under the hood, we're recursively calling OpenAI. I think that's pretty straightforward. But we've reworked our whole context module. Mainly, the main bit that we've reworked was prioritization. So we're introducing even more context to the model and selecting it, depending on the user's context, whatever feels like most important. But also we're focused on conversation history. With the classical deep node AI, you wouldn't really get to the point where the content that we might feed into GPT would overflow the context window. This is not the case with Auto AI. It can generate a whole notebook. Notebooks tend to be quite large. We needed a way to somehow summarize the conversation or the notebook contents up to a certain moment. For some of you, this might remind you of a familiar tool, and that's ChatGPT's Advanced Analyst, or also called Code Interpreter. And you're right, those two things are quite similar, but there are things that set Auto AI apart. And that's mostly the limits of ChatGPT's Advanced Analyst. With Auto AI, you can connect to any data source. I think in ChatGPT's Advanced Analyst, you can only upload a CSV file. I mean, good luck trying to connect a database. You just can't do that, at least not now. There is no file size limit. I'm not sure what the file size limit is now in ChatGPT, but I think it's like 30 megabytes, 100 megabytes. There is one. There isn't one in Deep Node with Auto AI. Your work with Auto AI is retained and resumable. You can always come back to it. And the outputs that the Auto AI produces are a notebook. And you're, of course, free to run that notebook again, reproduce the results, and of course, they're collaborative. It's easy to share those results with one of your teammates. And now here I'm coming back to the food for thought that I wanted to leave you with, and that's what is the perfect interface for working with LLMs? We think it's the data notebook. Why? Well, at Deep Node, you have basically an AI companion at every single level. There's Deep Node AI Copilot. I didn't talk about that today, but basically it's like GitHub Copilot, and that accompanies you on the line level. Then you have Deep Node AI that accompanies you at the block level, helps you generate full blocks. And then there's Auto AI, the end-to-end notebook generating autonomous analyst. Why do we think that Data Notebook is the perfect interface for working with LLMs? It's because the AI outputs are fully editable. You are completely in control. The results are easily reproducible, and you can easily connect it to any of your other data or application. There are a couple of takeaways that I would like you to leave with here today, and that's, first off, develop AI products iteratively and listen to your user feedback. Don't make the same mistake as we did. It could also hurt us a bit more. We were kind of lucky that we burned our resources on that particular feature of splitting the code and text. We've learned our lesson and try to not repeat it. Second, provide the right context and engineer your prompts with evaluations. I think that the chance that the problem that you're particularly solving, the chances of the problem that you are solving being so unique that you can at least partially solve it with better context and better engineered prompts are extremely low. So yeah, it's a good tip, I think. And finally, integrate AI deep enough into your product, and you may as well reinvent your product completely. Thank you a lot for your attention, and of course I'll be happy to answer any questions. If you want to reach out or connect, feel free to do so. My website, email, all are there. Thank you.